Thank you, Sivia, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Another exciting Fugue Lunch and Learn. Fugue is designed to give developers and security teams complete awareness and understanding of their cloud security posture, knowledge of where they have risks in their environment, not just single cloud resource misconfigurations and compliance violations, but to go deeper to understand the blast radius risk of those vulnerabilities, so they can prevent the kinds of control plane compromise attacks that we're seeing pretty much in every major cloud breach today. And one of the big ways that Fugue helps teams avoid those kinds of risks is by empowering developers with tools that help them design secure cloud infrastructure environments and prevent these kinds of vulnerabilities from getting deployed. And that's where we're going to kind of focus on today, which is doing that in CICD with Gitlab and Fugue. And I think the infrastructure as code that we're going to be showing today is Terraform. We've got Aidan O'Connor here to walk us through this example. Hey, Aidan, how are you doing?
Hey, doing well, Drew. Thank you. And thanks, Sivia also. Thanks both of you for putting this together. As Drew said, I'm Aidan O'Connor. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer at Fugue. And today we'll be talking about integrating Fugue into CICD using Gitlab. A couple weeks ago, we did Bitbucket Pipelines, and then in a couple weeks, we'll have another one. So this is the second in a series of integrations of Fugue into CI/CD pipeline tools. So talking agenda for the day, we'll go into an overview of Fugue. For anybody who's not familiar, I know we've got a mix of current Fugue customers and others as well. So just reintroduce Fugue for some of you, or introduce it for the first time. And then we'll talk about today's use case. Get into some prerequisites for how you can go execute this right as you leave today, if you're a GitLab user. Talk about some intentional vulnerabilities I have in the Terraform code I'm going to be using today. We're going to kick off a build, let it fail. We're going to resolve some misconfigurations using the Fugue rule remediation steps that's in our documentation. And then finally, we'll talk through how you can deploy secure infrastructure from there. Just from a time perspective, I want to actually be deploying from this pipeline today, but I included some steps that are commented out, and you'll see that. And finally, we'll wrap up with a little bit of Q&A. So what I want to show you first is the Fugue platform and how we approach cloud security. So at Fugue, we're big believers that, well, first, we're developer first, and we realize that nothing security-wise is going to scale unless developers embrace security. So we make it very developer-friendly to implement security across the SDLC when it comes to cloud infrastructure. So a lot of people we talk to start off on the right. So that's over here, cloud runtime. So you get resources in the cloud, whether it's with IaC or whether it's clicking through the console of any of the three major cloud providers. And you deploy resources, and then maybe you wake up in a cold sweat one night wondering, how secure are these? If you see articles about, S3 buckets being infiltrated and then data being stolen. So you start scanning your running cloud infrastructure, and it's a good start. And that's where Fugue can help you. But in other ways, we can help you, and that's what I'll get into today. So once you start scanning your infrastructure as code, instead of scanning things in the runtime, you can get ahead of those misconfigurations that can put you at risk in the cloud runtime. So we'll scan your Terraform, cloud formation, and that's Terraform HCL code and JSON plans. Your AWS cloud formation, Kubernetes manifests, Docker files. We'll scan your infrastructure as code. And then finally, the way that you make this automated as the final piece of how we beat these cloud hackers is by automating your security scans, like they're automating scanning for your misconfigurations. And you do that with CI/CD. So everything I'm going to be talking about today can be applied to any CI/CD pipeline. But today in particular, I'm going to be talking about GitLab. And so GitLab has a pipeline feature that'll allow you to create these CICD pipelines. And so we'll be talking just in particular about how to do this GitLab, but keep in mind this can be done for any CI/CD pipeline tool. The final thing I want to touch on this is along the top, you'll see the Fugue Unified Policy Engine. So we don't do like other tools you might see. We don't look at cloud runtime differently than we look at cloud resources and CI/CD or as infrastructure as code. You might see other tools that have maybe proprietary languages, or they have rules defined for cloud runtime and then separate rules for infrastructure as code, because there's not a good handshake between those. So Fugue, using our unified policy engine, you don't even need a handshake between them because it's exactly the same rules. So keep in mind that any rules you see today, and the rules are, the format is FG_R and then 4 numbers. It's going to be applicable whether you're looking at your infrastructure as code on the left, within CI/CD, or the cloud runtime. So let's get into it. So prerequisites for today: you'll need a GitLab account, cloud provider credentials loaded into GitLab as repository variables, and I'll show you how you can do that in a minute. And then finally, of course, an IaC repository. So maybe something existing, or go test this in an inconspicuous area with something you pull from maybe the Terraform docs, and I'll show you how we do that also. On the right's a visual depiction of what I have in my repository. So obviously README to give brief explanation of this. I've got a logging bucket with a policy, and the S3 bucket that I'm going to be standing up today with its policy as well. And then finally, a KMS key to control entry into those. We've got a main Terraform file just for the basics, provider information. And then I've got a waivers file as well. And we'll get into what I'd be waiving in a minute. But without further ado, we'll get into the demo. And Sivia, please speak up if my code's a little small. So we'll start off looking at what I have in this repository. So as with all of these, I don't know how to do, like I didn't just make this up. I pulled this from somewhere. So I started off with something like what you might see here. So from the Terraform documentation, you can pull something. I think this is where I started. And then obviously I resolve these issues with Fugue documentation. But if you go to the Terraform documentation, you see you can pull code for a private bucket with tags. And that sounds pretty secure to me and ready to be deployed. So let's go test that. So we'll create something new, call it a bad bucket, because we'll find out it is. We'll paste this in there and then check it with Fugue. So again, this is from the Terraform documentation. So you have the kind of official approval of Terraform if it's in their documentation. You see you have a bunch of different options, but they're going to feed you kind of like as all documentation, they're going to feed you the simplest form of what you can do based on this example usage. So it's an S3 bucket. You got a couple tags, and then it's got a access control list. It's private. So if you're brand new, someone asks you to stand up an S3 bucket, this might look okay to you. So let's, if you want to use Regula, which is Fugue's open source tool that is enhanced by compliance mappings. If you're a Fugue customer, if you care about something other than CIS benchmarks, which is what Regula comes with. All you have to do is you can do a homebrew download and/or upgrade if you currently have Regula. You can download the binary from the Fugue releases page, or you can run it within our Docker image. So very easy to get started, but I've got it as a binary locally, so I can test this all locally. But keep in mind, anything I do here is voluntary. So your developers may or may not be voluntarily using this, and ultimately we want to automate it. But just a preface there. So I've got this bad bucket that I pulled from Terraform. I'm going to execute Regula run, and this is all you have to do if you want to check anything from the root directory of your repository, and then Regular will search recursively through all of your subdirectories and find anything that's wrong. But today I'm going to specify bad bucket just so we can see what could be wrong. So again, a private bucket with tags, 6 problems are found. These are in descending order of severity. So already we see the benefit of using Regula. First, for your IaC or for your cloud runtime, you got the same rule sets, and that's over on the left. You got a pretty basic description. Can't get much more developer friendly than just, hey, S3 bucket server-side encryption should be enabled. You've got documentation on how to go fix that, which we'll keep that in mind. We'll get into that in a minute. And then finally, severity. So let's say I have 10 minutes to go deploy this, and I don't have enough time to fix all 6 issues. It's already prioritized for me. So again, this makes it easy for developers to embrace security best practices by just kind of feeding this developer-friendly feedback to them. And then you see there are other rules here as well, and then we'll get into these soon. But documentation is important here. So if we click on the Fugue documentation, it brings you to the description we just saw for Fugue Rule 99. And then, like I said, it provides remediation steps, whether you want to go fix this in the console for a bucket that's already been deployed. It looks like 6 steps to me. So very easy to go from what's wrong to here's how you can fix it. An AWS CLI option. You got cloud formation, some JSON or YAML that you can paste into your templates. And then finally, what we use here today is Terraform. So keep this block in mind. I've already got it in the rest of my Terraform, but all you do is copy that over. You declare that server-side encryption configuration should be enabled, and then you apply the KMS key and the algorithm you want. So again, you get that right from the console, or right from the terminal, excuse me. So I execute Regular run against this known bad bucket. I get the 6 issues in priority order with documentation. Again, you can't get much more developer friendly than that. So let's clear out of here and get into the things that I put together for you today. So let me make sure we don't send that bad bucket up. Okay, hide this. So I've got, again, take a look, a couple things in this buckets directory. So let's start taking a look at what these issues might be. So if we execute Regular run, it's going to start in the root directory of this repository. It's going to check everything. So it's going to go through every file in buckets and look for all supported infrastructure as code template types, and then scan for CIS benchmarks against those IaC templates. Another option you can add is Regular run -- sync. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull in the configuration that I've established in my Fugue environment in the SaaS platform. So that's where Fugue customers, paying customers, can opt in for additional compliance families other than just CIS benchmarks. So that's one option we'll get into today. But for right now, let's stick with Regular run.
So I do have a question here from Dimitro. Yeah. How many rules does Regular have?
Top of my head, I don't know, but hundreds. And they're mapped across different compliance families. What I'll show you here, and I'll paste this link on the documentation, link to the documentation. We got the rules list here, which I'll drop in the chat. Send it to everyone. So that's the regula.dev rules page, and it's going to show all of the rules that we have. So you can jump down to just our Kubernetes rules, for example. We've got hundreds of rules, and then these rules also apply to multiple resource types. So if you didn't use Open Policy Agent, which I didn't get into, but that's the backing of all of our rules. That's what all of our rules are written in. We'd probably have to have thousands of rules, but because we can apply like this, for example, about IAM password policies. Because we can apply to multiple resource types, we drastically reduce the number of rules we have.
And
So-
in the regular project, they're all mapped to CIS Foundation's benchmarks.
Right. If anyone on the call right now knows exactly how many rules we have, please do drop that in the chat. But I hope that answered Dimitri's question. So what we see on the screen right now, let me hide the side here, is I have 9 problems and I need to go take care of. So again, this is Terraform that I originally pulled from the Terraform code docs and then went through, execute regular run. I've got some commented out intentional vulnerabilities that I'll work through and fix. But you see, I've got a couple of these issues that I need to go take care of, and I'll just show you how easy that is. So within the main bucket, we'll jump down here, and like we saw before, enabling server-side encryption is something that you need to do. Enabling versioning is a medium severity rule, but definitely a best practice. And so right now, we'll execute regular run again, and there are now 7 problems because I took care of those. But like I said before, this has all been voluntary. I've done this. I've decided to execute regular run, self-check my code, and I hope you see that this is easy and it's something you can encourage people to do. But what I'm kind of pushing here is that automation is the key to this. So we'll engage the GitLab repository. So I'll say GitLab, we'll add everything in buckets since I made a lot of changes there. I think there's some changes to my GitLab CI file, and then we'll commit it. So we'll say known add commit and push it. And then so GitLab in my pipelines area is going to pick up that I just sent this commit to GitLab, and it's going to start that pipeline. So I've got a couple things in the pipeline. So while this runs, we'll walk through the results of the pipeline. But here is the file that dictates what happens in the pipeline. So like I said, I'm not going to deploy the Terraform today. Deploy my resources today with Terraform just because it just time. Lunch hour is only an hour. I don't want to save some time for the Q&A. But you can use this template with GitLab. So they've put together a base template of how to deploy your Terraform, beginning with formatting, validation checks, and then building, deploying your Terraform. So you've got a format step, and this is all standard with GitLab that they've put together for you. But I've just added a script that just says, hey, this is what this step does. So Terraform formatting, Terraform validating, and then here's where we get to securing our IaC, right? So it uses the Fugue regular image, and you have to declare the entry point, and then it declares a regular version. I've set it up to do that so that if I ever have a failure in my pipeline, I can go back and check and make sure that we're using the latest version of regular. And then I execute regular run, and then you'll see a couple of things after that. So let's break this down. So we're all familiar with regular run right now. Very simple to understand, very simple to enact. But then the S flag, right? What does that mean? So very easy to find out all of the options for when you run regular. So regular run H. You can specify output formats. The standard is text with some spacing. You do JSON, a table, some compact, nothing at all. You can specify input types. So if you've got, for example, like we were working with somebody recently who had like a lot of data upload files. And so regular was searching all of those. So what we did for him is we said, hey, just specify a certain input type since you're working with just that input type. And he did, and it ran in obviously 1 to 2 seconds. But the S flag is for severity. So if you don't want to stop a build based on, like, let's say a low severity violation, especially if it's like a custom rule, it says like all S3 buckets should have a tag that says who the owner of the S3 bucket is, so you can get in touch with that person. So if you don't want to stop a build for that, and if you have time to go, fix those violations later, this is what you'd do. So you'd set a severity. So I left it as a repository variable. Go back here. So regular run severity critical or criticality. So what that's going to do is it's going to look for your repository variables, and that's what you see here. So for this, you just go into settings, CICD, you expand the variables section. And as you can see, like I said earlier, I have my AWS access key ID and secret. I've got my Fugue environment ID and my API ID and secret, which we'll get into why in a minute. But criticality. So I've set criticality at medium. So if there's anything medium or above, it's going to stop the build. If there's anything lower than medium, it's going to flag these issues, but it's not going to produce that non-zero exit code. So an important way that you can configure this. So, if you have something you need to stand up and you have, a bunch of low severity violations, there is a way around, we're not making sure that, that you do this, you can configure it. And I think that's one of the benefits of Fugue is the flexible use of it. So you're not forced into, all right, I have to go apply 100 tags to all of this infrastructure. I could put that off for later, maybe do it programmatically through AWS, but either way, I can get this to the cloud because I'm accepting that low risk. So anyway, so that's how you set the criticality. And then the sync pulls in whatever compliance families I have in the Fugue UI. And I believe for this, I've done CIS AWS version 1.4.0, which is in beta right now for us, and Fugue best practices. So the Fugue best practices are just, if we find that maybe some of these compliance families could have gone a little bit further in terms of security, we've added those. So it's an additional family you can add. It's available, I believe, for Fugue customers only. And then finally, the next thing we're going to do is upload the results of that scan. So the results of that scan will go into the Fugue UI, and you'll be able to view it in a more user-friendly way. The platform is very fun to use, and I'll show you how to use it. But anyway, so go back to the pipeline. I'm going to refresh this page, and we'll see that secure failed. And it will fail the same ways that it failed when we ran it locally. So our pipeline checked for the proper formatting and validation of our Terraform. Then when we get into secure, we'll see the output that we have those security issues with Fugue. So we need to go fix those. So again, we go fix the rest of these issues. So regular run, and we go find where the rest of these issues are. I'm gonna hide the terminal here. Then go fix all these issues. So you want to enable key rotation for this KMS key. We'll get out of there. And then you want to declare that this bucket policy belongs to my logging bucket. And you want to ensure that blocking public access, this resource block applies to my log bucket. I'm going to go into the actual log bucket itself and ensure that versioning is enabled. I'm going to make sure server-side encryption is enabled by default. And then from there, I know we still have some issues left over, but just to show this best practice, I'm gonna run regular again, and we see we just have 2 violations left. So go back in that main bucket policy, and like we did for that logging bucket, we will ensure that the block public access applies to that bucket. And the bucket policy with this role applies to this bucket. And we'll go into the main bucket, and I believe there are no issues here. I think I left this one pretty clean. But the good way to check is regular run. So no problems found. Tremendous. So what we'll do is So we will add everything in buckets, add our GitLab CI YAML file. And then finally, we will commit. We'll say known good commit. And we'll push. It's like we saw before. I'm gonna go back and we've got this in progress known good commit. GitLab, you have to refresh a lot. Some of the other tools will automatically pick it up for you. But yeah, known good commit. We've got this pipeline running. It's already past formatting. So again, this is where you'd see it uses that Terraform image and checks against the formatting of your Terraform against those HCL standards. Refresh. It's going to check to validate. And this would also use that Terraform image. And then it's going to check the security. And we see that just now, no problems found, right? So let's break down what it did again. So you've got regular run, it's got the criticality sync, and then it pulls in the rules from the Fugue SaaS platform. And then it applies those rules against my Terraform. So we refresh this, and it's going to go to build. And again, this is the Terraform step that'll begin the build process. And then finally deploy, which again, I'm not going to do today, but we'll deploy your Terraform here. And the last piece is something I haven't talked about yet, but we're going to do a Fugue scan. So what this does is hide all of this. So the last step is scanning the running infrastructure. So why would we check our Terraform, make sure that it's all secure, and then check it once it's deployed? And the reason for that is because things change when they go from IaC declaration into full deployment. And then people can also go change them. But one good example of this is I was standing up some Google Cloud infrastructure, and I kept it very simple. And I didn't declare specifically what I wanted my VPC to look like. And so for those of you that know Google Cloud platform, once you deploy your Terraform to the Google Cloud, it's going to assign a default VPC along with, I think, like 27 or 29 default subnets that are all insecure. And one of our Fugue rules is actually just completely scrap that default VPC and subnets and create your own. So I ran Regula on this pretty basic infrastructure. I think I just stood up like a virtual machine or something, and there were no problems found. And then once it got to the Google Cloud, scanned it again, and there are so many problems with it because of this insecure default network and VPC. So what this final step does, it depends on secure, right? So we're not going to go scan our running cloud infrastructure until we have this deployed with IaC. So if secure passes here, then we execute scan. And so what this is going to do, it's going to grab the Fugue CLI client. It's going to grab the latest version. It's going to move it, modify it, declare that Fugue version again, just in case there are any issues, you know which version of the CLI you were using. And then finally, you're going to conduct a Fugue scan of the environment ID. And that's my AWS environment ID. And it's going to take that, conduct another scan, and then report the results of that scan, where you'll see that there are new buckets, so a new logging bucket and a new S3 bucket. But again, I didn't deploy that. What you'll see is, right, so it grabs that latest version of the Fugue CLI client, downloads it in a very verbose manner, and then so a job succeeded. So already in the time I've just talked about this, we've conducted a full scan of my cloud infrastructure. So it'll give you that scan ID when the scan was created, then the status. Oh, apologies. So the scan's not completed yet. Typically, I add the -- wait flag. And so what that's going to do is it's not going to produce any results in the pipeline until the scan is completed. And then it'll give you a roll up of how many rules you violated and other results. So if we go take a look at that, we'll see that the scan is still ongoing. But I've got this AWS demonstration tenant that we'll get into. Oh, actually the scan has completed, right? So I select this, the last scan was conducted. I'm on Eastern time right now, so 1:32 p.m. And then the next scan is scheduled for 24 hours from now. And what we see, I was standing all of this up, as you could see in US East 2. So you can set this up to filter down and just look at US East 2. And then we can go check out what I have in that region. But obviously, again, I didn't deploy this infrastructure. But that's how you go from end to end. Of you start out with infrastructure as code, whether you get it like from the Terraform docs here with a supposedly private configuration, figure out what's wrong, figure out what you need to add. And the note I'll make about standing up S3 buckets that I'll wrap up with is, maybe sometimes you don't want to follow some of these rules and you don't just want to set a criticality. So what I've done here today, I said I would talk about, is I waived Fugue rule 274. So I didn't want to create another log bucket for my log bucket just because I didn't want to start, daisy chaining these. But using Rego, which is the open policy agent policies code language, you can declare that some rules will be waived, some rules will be disabled, and then once you actually get them into the cloud, then that rule's in violation, and you have to go take care of it then. So I think this is the best practice, a medium severity rule, but I've chosen to waive it here today.
Hey, Aidan, I may have missed it. Did you touch on waivers because of the question? Because we had a question specifically about waivers.
No. What was the question?
So Sue asked, how does Fugue work with exceptions? For example, if like a bucket needs to be publicly accessible, how would you get around kind of that rule or add a waiver or exception?
Yeah, so this is so you have to do two things right now. So you have an option here of waiving the rule. So all I do is I declare the rule that I want to waive and then the resource ID for which I want to waive it. So I've got this AWS S3 bucket, log bucket, and it's going to suppress that rule here within the IaC. And then once you get into the Fugue UI, what you're going to do is go into the rules. And this is where you can view all of your waivers. But what you do is go back into your environment. I don't know if I have Fugue rule 274 violated here, but what you can do is waive it. So you select the waiver, you give a name and a comment for why you're waiving it. And then you have your options for whether you want to affect all resource types, missing resources of this type, or a custom set of resources. So you've got a couple different options. We've got some exciting waiver improvements and new features for waivers coming down the pipeline. Won't talk about that right now, but yeah, I hope that answered Sue's question.
Yep, Sue, let us know if that answered your question completely. We have another question. Does Regula have integration with Terraform Cloud? And I can take a first swing at that, Aidan, if you want to jump in. So currently, no, we are working on integrating with run tasks. And so kind of stay tuned. We might have some stuff coming there within the next few weeks. Right now, you have an option if you want to do your regular evaluation via GitHub Actions within your repo. That'd probably be the way to go about doing that. Do you have anything else? I'm not super familiar with Terraform Cloud, Maybe you know more, Aidan?
No, that I could not have answered that better. So yeah, not super familiar with Terraform Cloud. GitHub Actions is something we get into in a future lunch and learn, but it would work just the same as this. You declare that regular should be run, and if it is not passed based on certain criteria, then you produce that non-zero code, stop the build. So yeah, any further questions?
Yeah, there actually does not look like there's another question at the moment.
Looks like Sue had one. How about for any resource if they have a particular tag or value? Yeah, so if we go back in here, so I could say I just want the key value pair for this resource to be waived. So where you might see that used is like a sandbox like development environment, and you don't want to enable a CloudTrail for all these things. You just want to see if something works. Then you can waive based on that. And then I see Dimitra has a question. Scan environment. Yeah, I'll go back to the CI file. So scan environment ID. Okay, yeah. Let me start with that first question. You got a couple questions. So this executes the Fugue CLI argument for Fugue scan, and then it's going to accept the environment ID variable that I've set in my CICD settings. So I've got this Fugue environment ID here. And so that's what that does. Scanning your environment versus AWS config, AWS security hub. Yeah, like the kind of comparing how you'd use it. I mean, first of all, what I'd say is if you have a multi-cloud strategy, you can't really use AWS config or AWS security hub for your Azure, for your Google Cloud resources. You're not going to be able to scan your IaC. And I don't know, Drew, if you have anything else, a little outside the scope of this.
Yeah, I mean, as far as scanning the environment, what Fugue does is it will scan your AWS, Azure, Google Cloud environments and bring back all of the information about every resource that you have running in those environments, including every configuration attribute of those resources, compliance violations, additional security violations that you've set in your policy as code with Fugue. And it also, and I think that with what Aidan has shown, it generates interactive maps of your environment. And by interactive, you can kind of zoom out and see the big picture about how resources relate to each other. I think this can give you some unique insights into what your environment looks like, as well as to assess kind of the potential blast radius of individual resource misconfigurations. Some on the surface may appear either critical or not severe, but when you actually kind of see how those resources are related to each other, oftentimes you can find issues that might not be caught with just kind of a scan that you might find with another tool. Another thing is you can find orphaned resources, which are frequently the cause of kind of initial penetration events in cloud hacks that we see today. So just kind of resources that, it's easy to spin things up in the cloud, and it's a little bit more difficult a lot of times to kind of track everything that you've spun up and tear it down when you don't need it anymore. And if it's orphaned, you might not be keeping it updated or patched or scanning it. So Fugue catches all of that to make sure you're aware of everything that's running and the security posture of all of that stuff, and then be able to tie that back to development with your infrastructure as code, and use a single unified policy engine and those same policies in infrastructure as code as well as in the runtime. So hopefully that answered your question. Obviously, if you're using some specific product, we'd love to have a deeper conversation with you to understand your use case better and show you how Fugue can can help make your lives a lot easier.
Yeah, Dimitri, I'd say if you want to continue this conversation further about how we stack up against the products that you've listed, I definitely reach out to sales@fugue.co. Sue, there is a free trial available. I'll actually get back into my slide deck. But the last thing, Dimitri, to wrap up your questions. So how to protect secrets in CI. So as you can see, I've got all of these secrets. That's on GitLab, right? So GitLab has these protected, masked, etc. So follow GitLab's best practices. That's a responsibility of the CI/CD tool that you use. But I'll finish up with this call to action.
Yeah, and throw out Dimitri, or I'm not sure, somebody asked about voice. We're not set up to do voice, so if you can get those into chat, or if you want to ask a question anonymously, feel free to pop that in that Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can tackle that question outside of the chat, and I'll avoid using your name. So get that in. Let's see, yeah, next week we've got a lunch and learn that's going to dive into kind of building out custom policies with Fugue as well. I think Regula will play a role in that as well. With regard to the person that asked the question about Terraform Cloud, we do have a lunch and learn that's going to be really a deep dive on Fugue and Terraform. It won't necessarily be Terraform Cloud specific, but it will really get into all the nuts and bolts of securing your Terraform pre-deployment with Fugue and Regula. And let's see here. Okay, yeah, I think Aidan, you're typing an answer to that one in okay, so Sivia posted the link for the free trial. We encourage you. A lot of our customers kind of want to just get their hands on Fugue and figure it out from there. So you can do that at fugue.co/free-trial. You're going to get the moment you point Fugue at your cloud environment, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. You're going to get a lot of rich information back within 15 minutes, including that interactive map, any kind of compliance assessments that you set up. And we're obviously available to chat with you one-on-one with Aidan or Ricardo or Ankush or any of our solutions architects here at Fugue. We'd love to kind of understand sort of what your use case and challenges are, and kind of what, work together on showing what Fugue can deliver for you. We do have an interesting resource available, the State of Cloud Security report. We do this every year. This is a deep dive into what cloud users are seeing and experiencing with regard to security, the rate of misconfiguration, the challenges they're experiencing, and some of the solutions that they're finding are helpful to them. So it's a rich resource. Encourage everybody to get that at fugue.co/report. And if we don't have any questions, I think that will do it for here. Sue, get in touch with us. We do have a pricing page up on our site as well. That should give you some sense of what our pricing is, from free to enterprise in between. So thank you.